Welcome to the Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast. I'm your host, Laura L. Smith. Join me as I chat with the most amazing guests about how God can and will empower us to do the same brave things the women of the Bible did. Stand up for justice, say yes, be the change, do the crazy thing, step into freedom, find community, reach out, share our gifts, and so much more. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss a single episode. Today, I'm chatting with Ruth Chou Simons. Ruth is a best-selling author of several books and Bible studies, an artist, entrepreneur. Check out her beautiful art at gracelaced.com. Podcaster and speaker, using each platform to spiritually sow the word of God into people's hearts. Ruth and her husband Troy are parents to 6 boys, their greatest adventure. Hi, Ruth. Thanks so much for being on the show.
It's such a joy to be here.
I am so incredibly honored. So we are going to dive in fast and furious here on the Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast. And I'm so curious. I think this is such a great icebreaker, which makes me a Bible nerd for sure. Who is your favorite woman of the Bible and why?
You know, when you ask that question, I think, oh my goodness, that is a hard one because so many, reasons for different characters of the Bible, different people's stories. But what's on top of mind for me right now is Mary, mother of Jesus, and her response when she was told she was going to be the mother of Jesus. And I think about that response of humility and yet exaltation of God. And I think that that's just been such an example to me. And obviously there's different reasons why Hannah comes to mind or Esther comes to mind. And I think of so many different women of the Bible, but that particular response, maybe in this particular holiday season for me, is just the reminder that you can feel like a nobody. You can struggle with feeling unseen or unknown or too weak or not capable enough. And if you're walking with God, if God calls you to do something, he will be with you. And your only job is to say, you're great. I'm going to come under that authority. That's all I need to do. And that's just such a good example to me in my everyday life.
Yeah. What a great reminder to all of us, no matter where we are, because we all believe we're underqualified for things. So yeah, Mary is a great reminder to us and what God did through her. It's awesome. So Ruth, you have this beautiful book titled Now and Not Yet. Anyone listening, go get it. I loved it so much. It really spoke to my soul. It talks about all the in-between places, which I believe we're all in between places. Even if we're at a high point or a low point in one area of our life, there's another area of our life where we're in an in-between place or a waiting place, as Dr. Seuss calls it. In these seasons, in these places, we often have this feeling restlessness, like we should be doing something else or that we're forgetting something or that maybe there's more than this or even that we're behind. Why do you think so many of us feel this restlessness?
I think we stay so busy that we don't take the time to ask ourselves, what is it that we are really longing for? What is it that we think we're missing in our lives? And so we just call it restlessness when we're like, well, I just need a change or I need to be doing something more. But I've really found that it serves me really well when I take the time to ask myself, what does my restlessness point to? What is it that I think that I really need to be happy that I don't have? What is it that I think I'm supposed to be doing? And what do I think that that's going to get me? And a lot of times if I take the time to ask myself a few hard questions, it'll help open up this picture of, wow, am I restless because ultimately I feel inspired or because I feel pressured? Is it that I think that I need to be busier and do more things? Or is it just that I'm longing for a sense of accomplishment or a sense of worth or some sense of I'm not wasting my life? And so that restlessness can oftentimes be more a picture of what I'm worshiping, like whether I'm worshiping my own ability to get things done or whether I'm worshiping my ideals or whether I'm really trusting God or not. And so I think it's a really good place to start for all of us, because when we feel restless, sometimes we'll go to coffee with a girlfriend and be like, I feel so restless. And it's really easy for us to just be like, well, let's go on a trip or let's go shopping for the day or just, go work out. You'll get it out of you. And all those things might be fun and good, but we got to kind of peel back the onion layers and the layer after layer and get to the heart of it and say, that's really what I'm after. And is my trying to stay super busy either mentally or physically or trying to constantly do the next thing, is that actually going to solve the real problem?
Yeah, no, that's so good, because what I hear you saying is we're truly discerning, is this restlessness because God has something more for us? Is he asking us to step into something to, take the course, to
Mm-hmm.
quit something, to try something, to do something, to
Yeah.
meet someone, to reach out? Or do we just have this pressure from the world or from culture to measure up or
Yeah.
be like
Yeah.
someone else? And there's a difference for sure. So that discernment can help us see, like, is this from the Lord? And if so,
Yeah.
I want to step into it. And if it's just because she has really cute, has totally redecorated her house on Instagram, that doesn't mean I have to.
I think the disquietude in our hearts sometimes can even be, if we're honest, because I feel like we've kind of looked at it from both these two different sides, but then there's another side that I think sometimes is a restless, our restlessness can reveal a sinful discontentment with what God's
Mm,
already given us. So sometimes
yeah.
it's that He's given us something to do. He's actually called us to be faithful. We might be in a season of motherhood, and those littles in our house, I mean, we're not getting a paycheck for feeding them, clothing them, and disciplining and discipling and working through math lessons. And it might feel like, oh, I'm so restless. I'm so restless. But perhaps in that very season, you need to remember, I have found myself needing to remember that I asked the Lord for these children. I am so grateful for these children. This is what I have been given to do right now. Doesn't mean can't do anything else, but that I need to steward this well. And that restlessness sometimes is pointing to even a disquietude in my own heart that I'm like, I just don't want to do what doesn't come easy. I don't want to do something I don't enjoy in the moment. I want to do something flashier or more fun or kind of rewards me better. And so I think it's just good to have a little bit of self-awareness of like, what is that restlessness pointing to?
Yeah. No, and that could obviously, as you said, be with motherhood, but it could be in our marriages.
In your
It's a
work?
relationship. So, we need to sacrifice ourselves sometimes. We need to, not always go after what we want. And I see so many people in their marriages complaining about their spouse when they prayed for a good spouse for so long and then they found them. So
Yeah.
are we actually stepping into what God has for us? Like you said, in your work, again, like
Yeah.
work, there's things we love about it and it's called work. Sometimes it's hard, right? So are we
Yeah.
just frustrated that we have to do the parts we don't like, or are we actually being called into a different job? Totally different things. And if we don't do the discernment, if we're just doing the quick fixes, like you said, like going shopping or
Yeah.
working out, which I think working out's actually really good for our mental
Yeah.
health and our
They're
bodies,
great.
but if we don't take the time to sit with the Lord in it, then we're never going to know.
And I think the thing that I'm always kind of circling back around and realizing in my own life, and probably the heart of this message and now and not yet, is that God is at work actively in your right now season. And there's not a formula that fits for everyone. What you're going through, what I'm going through, there are things that the Lord's calling us to steward well, and there are things that the Lord's calling us to let go of. There are things that we're going to move on from. And then there are seasons that may stay the same for some of us for a very long time. None of those things mean that God's showing favor to one and not the other, or that I'm somehow out of his care. So rather than just trying to figure out how to get out of what we don't like in the moment, we actually need to discern and say, there's a spiritual component to it. God's not wasting this. So if I feel
Right.
restless, if I'm struggling, if I don't like what I have, what does it look like to ask the Lord, what do you want for me to learn or do with the season I'm currently in?
Yeah. Yeah. To ask him to open our eyes to what's around us and what he's blessing us with and how we can live
Hmm.
for him today. Yeah. So that's easier said than done sometimes. Lots of times. How about in seasons of obscurity when we really don't feel noticed or seen? How can we bravely step into what God has for us in those times? Because those times just feel icky. Like, I don't want to be
Yeah.
unseen or unnoticed.
Yeah. I think about how often when we want to be noticed or seen, it can be for good reasons and can be for reasons that are far from finding our hope in the Lord. The good
Yeah.
reasons could be like, I just want to be loved and acknowledged and known for how much I care. That's not wrong. There's nothing sinful about that. But sometimes we're unhappy about not being seen or known and feel obscure because there's somebody on the internet who's really well known for something that I'm just as good at, but nobody notices me. Or I serve so much at church, but I don't ever seem to get acknowledged for that. Or I work so hard at home, but my family members just go on by and nobody seems to acknowledge. And I think ultimately in both cases, whether it's out of a pure and like really good, like I just want to like make connections versus I want to be seen. In both cases, I think we have to start with, can we really find our absolute worth identity and value in the Lord. Because no matter how much you're noticed, how much you're seen, or whether you blow up on the internet, or if all your family members say, Mommy, thank you so much for the most amazing meal, none of those things will satisfy if it doesn't start with saying, Lord, I feel so unseen. I feel so unnoticed. And I think about how Hannah in the Bible did that very thing. She felt completely obscure, completely unseen, actually ostracized because she couldn't bear a child. And her ultimate direction was to turn to the Lord and not to just say, okay, I'm going to figure out how to get what I want, but to say,
Right.
Lord, I'm broken and sad. Can I talk to you about this? Can
Yeah.
I tell you how much I desire this? I think about others who have gone through hidden seasons. Joseph in a dungeon for many, many years, forgotten,
Yeah.
passed up, betrayed. And again, God remembers him. He remembers the Lord. He spends a lot of time recalling what is true about God so that he doesn't sin against God. So I think about how the example of so many who God ultimately either turns their stories around or causes them to see a with a different perspective every single time. It's not that that person's circumstances instantly changed. It's that they turned their eyes to the hope of Christ. They said, hey, my absolute joy and worth and value will not be only if my circumstance change. It has to be that God, you meet me here. And so I think no matter what we're going through, I'm guessing none of us are feeling betrayed in a dungeon right now, but some of us might
I
feel,
hope not.
hope not. But I think a lot of us can relate to feeling unseen or unnoticed because let's say all our friends are married and we're single, or feeling like in a certain season, everybody has family, but we're not close to our family members.
Yeah.
There are so many things, especially during holiday seasons or special occasions, where we can just feel like I don't belong. I'm invisible. I don't know if anybody sees me. And I think that's when we have to remember the character of God, because friends are good. Communities, great. We're called to the local church. Let's be in community and be seen and known and loved. Absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, the number one most important thing, starting from the very first moment God walked with man in the garden, was that he wanted us to know his presence. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted us to walk freely with him. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing in this world will ever take the place of knowing the presence of God when we feel unseen, hidden, or invisible in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's just a lie that we're unseen. Like if we believe we're unseen, it's a lie because Jesus sees us. He's with
Yeah.
us always and everything. The Holy Spirit dwells within us. So when we're feeling that way, I think we need to tear down that lie and be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm believing this. I'm saying this even about myself, but it's not true. It's not true. The Lord promises to be with me even to the end of everything. That's Jesus's promise. That we've got to tear down that lie. So that's hard sometimes.
Which is why I think the psalmist, even, in Psalm 139, that beloved psalm about being known even in our mother's womb,
Yes.
like to have every moment of our days, it doesn't matter where we go or what valley we're in, that God sees us, knows us, and is with us. I think that's why all parts of scripture testify to the presence of God and to how precious we are really to him. And so, yeah, I mean, it is easier said than done, but I think it's not just, I love what you said about how we have to tear down that lie. Well, we can't just tear it down and say, you're not unseen. You are seen and known and loved. Well, for me, I'll just testify that like kind of positivity only lasts until about 9 a.m. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I feel these things. I feel all this. What do I do when I got an email like this, or somebody responded to me like that, or I just can't get past these feelings that I have going on. So I have to have truth to like offset and to replace the negative or untrue thoughts. And so I think you're exactly right. We have to like tear down that lie, but we have to rebuild with truth and go to scriptures like Psalm 139 to remind ourselves, how is it that God sees me or knows me? What does that mean? What is it like for a God to love me so much that he would make a way for me to not be ever out of sight of his presence?
Yeah, no, 100%. And reading scripture is a perfect, awesome way to replace lies with truth, because scripture is truth. Prayer is another way, like you said, that Hannah did and Joseph did. Like they turned to the Lord, like this is how we feel. And for anyone listening, if you think God doesn't want to hear that, just go to the Psalms. The psalmist told them everything and they just poured it
Yeah.
out, and God could have edited that out of the Bible if he wanted to. But he said, I want this in here because I want my people to know they can share all of their feelings with me. So
Yeah.
I urge people to read their Bibles if they're feeling unseen or left out or overlooked, or, young mamas in the day in, day out, they're not getting thank yous or kudos from their kids. They're not getting a performance report or a promotion, right? They're just doing the things like that. Go to the Bible, remember who God is, remember who he says you are, remember who he says you're about him, and then talk to him about all your feelings, because he wants to listen and he wants to remind you who
Absolutely.
you are. Yeah, 100%. Do you have any other tips, Ruth, for those feelings when you're feeling that way? To read our Bibles and pray, like those are amazing. But what else can we do to remember
Yeah.
who we are? Remember that God is with us.
I think just a real practical tip, I would say to have relationships that you can touch and have dinner with. Don't spend all your time on the internet where it might feel like you have community online and you might feel like you found 20 accounts that are just like you. And so it feels like you seen because your comment is part of something where everybody feels the same way. That's not real community. And you might find a tribe online. You might find alignment online, but you and I need people who can come over while we're prepping dinner and speak truth to us and to
Yeah.
see us and to hear what's going on, to know when our house is messy. And so I think when we feel tempted to think we're unknown, unseen, obscure, kind of forgotten, I think it's a good time to take inventory and say, well, when have I invited somebody into my life? How have I invited somebody else to be vulnerable with me so that I could be vulnerable with them? And that vulnerability doesn't really show itself through comments and likes and subscriptions. It's really through engagement in a human form. So the local church, relationships, mentoring, friendships, going on a walk with a neighbor, those kinds of things really do matter. So I would say that's a real practical tip, to take inventory and say, like, it's a real feeling if you feel like you're not connected. And so we need to replace that with real connection.
I love that. That's so good in our day and age where we pick up our phones in those moments of void, in that moment of feeling alone or lonely or not seen. We pick it up as if it has the answers, but it can if we use it not to be on social media. And listen, we're all on social media. I'm not against it, but that's not where we're going to get our value or worth. But if we use it, maybe, like you said, to be the one to reach out to a friend, not just wait to be like, oh, I didn't get, invited to anything this spring. I feel like everyone else is doing stuff together. I'm not in a play group. I'm not in a book club. I'm not in a small group. Like, to be the person then to be, I can reach out, I can invite, I can start my own small group, I can start my own Bible study, I can invite, people to do this thing with me. That we have to sometimes take the initiative instead of just waiting for it to knock on our door. Okay, you say and now and not yet that you don't have to be blooming to be growing. I love that quote so much, and just have kind of gone back to it a few times, because I believe that culture, again, another lie that it tells us, is that we do have to be blooming all the time, right? Like, see
Or
all
that
the
it's
amazing,
easy.
perfect
Like you
things,
just,
or that it's easy.
right. Just use the right
Yes,
fertilizer, sign up for the right webinar or 6-week course, and you'll be full bloom right away. It's like there's a
right.
right way to get there fast.
Yeah. But that's not true. I think of even, my favorite things I actually like to cook, it's not Taco Tuesday. I mean, we do that because it's quick and easy and everyone in my family likes it. But I love making sourdough that has to rise all day. I like making a good pot of soup that has to simmer for an hour or two, like really
Yeah.
beautiful things. And I know you talk about in the books painting assignment you had in college where you had to redo 10 times, was part of the assignment, not because you'd done anything
Yeah.
wrong, but part of the assignment was all these layers to it. Really beautiful things come from long growth seasons. But how do we delight in the midst
Yeah.
of the growing of our roots going down? Well, and that's the metaphorical, but like while we're
Yeah.
practicing, while we're
Yeah.
learning, while we're putting in the 10,000 hours when we're only on the 2,000 hours, like how do we delight in that time, knowing that God is with us, like we've talked about in all of it? How do we actually delight in that time and remember, like, this is part of it? Like, I don't
Right.
need to wait. The 10,000 hours is great, but that's not, like, we never actually arrive. The present
Yeah.
moment is where God is with us right here.
And I think that sometimes we get overwhelmed when we think, oh, it's going to take me so long. But the reality is, I don't know that it's actually about, it's not like if you do this for 5 years, you're going to suddenly see true growth. I think there is a principle there that practice does matter. Time does matter. But I think the greater principle is actually that there is a process. I think process actually makes more sense than just saying it's a length of time. Because,
Yes.
right? I mean, the truth is some of us can see a lot of growth happen in a short amount of time, but there's still a process. So it's more that we need to think about the fact that, well, when I first jotted down this phrase, you don't have to be blooming to be growing. It was years ago. I jotted it down just on my phone as I was like, watering plants. And I kept thinking, when will this lemon tree, well, when will this bloom? I'm just so ready for the little blooms to come out and for me to get like lemons. I've been like watering it, taking care of it for so long. When's this going to happen? And I was realizing that my weekly routine of going around and watering houseplants. I had an indoor Meyer lemon tree. That's what I was referring to. And outside gardens, like it was constantly a lot of work in the process of checking on the soil, of deadheading or weeding or making sure that it's healthy. And the bloom part wasn't the thing that was happening all the time. That's maybe coming in the future, but I was realizing that so much of the blooms depended on me being faithful right in the part where it wasn't all flashy and pretty. And
Yeah.
so I was reminded in that season, like, Ruth, don't look over the proverbial fence to somebody else's garden and go, why are her dahlias just all a bloom? Why can't I have blooms like that while I'm still sitting there like weeding and deadheading and kind of checking on the soil? Because at the end of the day, we're all in process. We're all in some part of the process. And so your question about how to delight in the process, I think in some sense, I guess I would just say for me, it's partly that I have to reset my expectations for how quickly I can come to arriving and what arriving really means. Because it's like expectations make all the difference, right? If you think you're supposed to be like, hey, I read a book and now I'm supposed to not ever struggle with this anymore. And now I'll live in total freedom and everything's going to be great. That expectation I'll feel really, really down and have zero delight when I have to do it again and again. And I remember one time, I don't think I wrote about this example in the book, but I'm a mama to 6 boys. And so there was a season where they were every 2 years and I did birth them one at a time. And there was a season where I was just all in, like in the trenches, whether changing diapers, feeding, picking up spills, pregnant, nursing, all the things. And I remember writing an article one time thinking that I was finally realizing I'm embracing motherhood for what it is, not to try to get on the other side of it. It was one of the first times I kind of learned the core message here that I ended up writing about like, a decade and a half later. But it was that message and that realization that if your expectation is that you're supposed to figure out how to teach your kids how to do something one time, and then you never have to teach them again, then you're going to be really disappointed when you wake up the next day and they still don't know how to match their socks, or they still didn't put away their laundry the right way, or they're still fighting. And so it took me a good decade of recognizing this is part of the process. The process, this is the joy of motherhood. This is the joy of learning to be an artist, that I got to practice, paint it again and paint it again, that it's not a one and done, that as an author, somebody who's writing, that I might have to write for a year, every day for a year, on things that nobody even reads before I'm really ready to write something that actually is substantial enough for somebody else to grab hold of. So I think it's that realization that we need to reset our expectations and say, I am doing a good thing here, even if I can't see results right now. And I think it changes our mindset. It changes even our delight. And one of the things that helps me reset that is to pay attention to the seasons in nature, is to go on walks and to take note of, why is there a season where all the trees and the plants go brown and everything shrivels up and dies off? Like, is this a wasted season, or is something happening in the season? Why is there a season where everything is in full bloom, but it doesn't stay that way always? So when I start noticing God's rhythms in nature, it helps me realize that there's a rhythm to my formation as well in my life.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love the 4 seasons so much. I lived in Florida for a year and I missed the 4 seasons. No offense, anyone living in Florida.
Right.
Florida is warm and lovely, but being an Ohio girl, I missed the change. And I think because it does signal so much, and it is one of God's ways of showing us and revealing to us that, as it says in Ecclesiastes, there is a time and a season for everything. That is one great way, besides seasons, or for maybe someone living in Florida or California where there aren't the change of seasons. How else can we really stay faithful in the everyday tasks? Like you said, you came to a realization that this is motherhood, but sometimes it's not even just that we have to keep teaching that same thing. Sometimes it's
It's
that,
just that
okay,
life is mundane.
like we
too,
learned, we potty trained, but now we need
Yes,
to learn how to ride a bike. And now we need to
I
learn how to
know.
read a book. And now we need that. And, you and I both have bigger kids now, young adult children, but there's still things I pray that I'm modeling for them, teaching them, guiding them towards. So how else besides looking at the seasons, can we just stay faithful in our journeys and delight in them, even when the process, honestly, could be our whole life, not just a 1 year process.
I see that process in my business journey and our home renovation. Like there are so many things that I wish I could snap my fingers and be like, I am now on to the next stage. Why am I still here? Why do I still have to do this side of it? And some of us, well, not some of us, I think all of us live a more mundane life than we think, right? You get on the internet and you think everybody's like doing something really dynamic, but everybody's actually doing laundry or like
Right.
emails, and there's mundane in all of our lives. Well, I don't know that this is a brilliant tip, except that I would just say, I think taking one thing at a time and celebrating small successes makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's
I've
good.
repeatedly said, I get up in the morning and make my bed every day. There's just like zero, no negotiating this fact. I put on my clothes. I actually get ready for the day, even if I'm not going to see anybody. I make sure I brush my hair and get into like hard pants, I call them, right? Get into real clothes. And
Right.
I'm not saying this is not like saying you're supposed to wear something specific. If you wear sweats and that's how you get ready, there's nothing wrong with like, it's not a choosing of what you should wear. It's about the mindset of I'm going to do one small thing to get me ready for what God's called me to. So making my bed says, look, I got one thing done. This is done. And now I can dump my laundry on my bed. I could snowball into I'm not making progress. I'm making progress with one little thing. And so I think maybe even whoever's listening, if you're in a long season of you're on a journey, whatever it is. Maybe you're in an adoption journey. Maybe you're in a renovation journey. Maybe you are in a health journey. Whatever it is that you're doing that seems like, why does progress feel so hard? And it's just like this really long thing. I would say it's not that you're not looking at the end goal. Yes, we want to go the direction of that end goal, but today, just look at the next thing you're supposed to do. Just the one next thing. And then when you do it, celebrate it and
Yeah.
stop thinking, wow, I should have been 4 steps ahead. Just say, I did this one thing today. And I'm so grateful that I had the focus and the stamina and the energy to accomplish this and celebrate that and then start there the next day or this
Yeah.
afternoon or whatever it is. So I really think that a lot of times and again, I hate to keep coming back to the internet, but I think we just see, what we call highlight reels or the end of the story or their revival
Snapshots.
point. It's just so easy to say, she is already now a successful business person, or, oh, wow, like that person got published so easily, or, wow, how does that person have really wonderful, obedient children who don't throw things? It could be so easy to be like, look at how that person just arrived. And we're not able through the medium of social media really see the work behind the scenes or the sacrifices or the prayer or the taking one day at a time or the celebrating little successes like I wiped my kitchen counter off even though it got dirty 30 minutes later. Those little acts of faithfulness do add up, but we need to remember to celebrate those things in the moment as we're going. That's just something that I think I do every day is I have to stay in the moment with the next thing that I'm trying to be faithful in.
Yeah. No, I think we beat ourselves up saying, I didn't get anything done today, this week. I'm so far behind, blah, blah, blah. Like you said, especially in a long journey. But if it is, you said a health journey or a mental health journey, maybe you scheduled an appointment with a counselor today. Give yourself some credit there. Like give yourself some grace that you aren't completely free of your trauma. Of course not. But how about like I did this brave thing. I did this step. I did this thing. Like just actually I think we are hustling around so fast and also just not believing who God says we are and not giving ourselves credit for the steps that we are taking, the ways we are being faithful, as you said, which all matter. And I think another thing we can do is I try to do this, just say, God, show me what you want me to see here. I know Psalm 23 tells us your goodness and love follows me all of my days. So today you have goodness and love for me, even if it feels mundane, even if it feels like day one of 5,009 in this process. Like, just ask him to open my eyes to it. And when I do, he always delights me. When I actually ask him, like, please help me see your goodness and love in this moment, he always delights me with something beautiful.
He really could have made the day come into order without a beautiful sunrise. He could have caused food to taste all the same, but God is the God of delight who actually does give us all our senses, all our experiences. We can listen to beautiful music and be moved. We can smell something and have memories. We can go outside and open our eyes and see a lot of things that we didn't have anything to do with, that we didn't make, that we didn't create. And so in all those things, I would say, you're right. Like when we're in the mundane, we need to remember that we're not doing those things just to survive, that we serve a God, that we're living. If we've been given breath today, then everything we're doing today has purpose in the calling of a God who actually delights in us and wants us to have to experience delight in the very places he's put us. And so does it mean that every single moment I'm going to be like, I'm doing dishes. I feel so much delight in doing dishes, and that's obviously not the way that works. But as we're doing dishes, what if you look up? What if you look up and look outside and notice something about the sun going down? What if you look up and see your kids laughing and giggling and saying, wow, Lord, thanks that I get to do the dishes and care for a home where it's full of laughter and noise and joy. So it is about shifting our gaze and, like you said, asking the Lord to help us see the way he sees.
Yeah, because he does have so much goodness for us. He is so, so very good. I'm so grateful for him. Yeah, he's so good. So, Ruth, I've heard you talk about starting where you are, and you talked about just a second ago about like making your bed. And that's a great way that you can kind of say, I did something today. I made some progress today, right? My bed looks neat. And that is a way to make progress. But can you talk about the choices and habits that we make today that can impact our futures?
There's a phrase that I have said and I say to myself regularly is that your someday is made up of thousands of right nows. And I think because when I look at my personal journey, I can see how this right now moment where I'm sharing with you on this podcast, I've written a message that gets into the hands of a lot of people. Years ago, I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't trying to create these things. I wasn't saying, Lord, give me purpose in my life and it's going to look like this. I was just making small choices in my everyday life. But those small choices did add up day by day, little by little. And again, nothing I'm sharing by way of testimony or example is meant to be formulaic. This is not a do as I do. It's always just like, can I just tell you my story and figure out how it applies to your own life? I'm not telling anyone how to do it, but I would just say, didn't become an author randomly. Sometimes people think, wow, how did you happen into this? I didn't study writing. I wasn't trying to be an author. And so it wasn't that I was trying, but I'll tell you, there was a season where the little choices I was making was to work out the things that were going on in my heart through a blog. It was choosing not to watch TV. And again, not formulaic, not me saying don't scroll on, don't do Netflix. Watch Netflix if that brings you joy and that's part of your life. I'm just saying that the choices that we make little by little are consequential. And for me, during a busy season where I hardly had any free time because I was raising so many littles, my only time was after they went to bed. And that was spent either discipling younger women or young couples, as my husband and I did premarital counseling, or I couldn't turn on the TV if I wanted to spend a little time blogging. So blogging every single day for years actually prepared me. It's not that it suddenly turned into a book. It's that it prepared me for what God was calling me to later down the road that I couldn't even see. So I think the testimony there is basically, what can you do today to step into the way God's wired you, to use your time well, to grow and say, I'm not sure what this is ever going to turn into, but it really gives me life to read this subject or to take this class or to just spend some time writing or thinking, whatever it is, even if you're journaling, if you choose to journal, ever stop and think don't ever think that is just something that will, who knows it'll just be wasted in the season. I think every little thing, God uses everything. God uses even the conversation that you think, just I don't know what'll ever happen with that conversation. Well, it always comes back around. It might come around in the way he transformed your heart and the other person's heart. It might be that that topic or the way that conversation went comes up later on and serves as a lesson for something else that's going on in your life. And so maybe that's just a charge and a call from somebody who is entering my 50s very soon, just looking back on the last 50 years and saying, I see example after example of how my someday is made up of thousands of little, seemingly inconsequential decisions, but choosing to say, okay, right now, I want to be fully present. Right now, I want to make a good decision that aligns with truth and not numbing myself out. I'm not going to just wait for everything to be fine before I start learning and growing. Or because I think so many times we're just like, I'm going to wait for that season where, I'm my best self before I start anything. Just start now, little by little, and you never know what's coming around the bend for you.
I love that encouragement so much. I heard you say two really important things there. One is to be obedient to God. And so that means we need to be in communication with him, as we said earlier, reading the Bible, talking to him. And just if he's nudging you to do something, like try it, explore it. It doesn't have to be the bestseller now or the piece of art that's in a museum or an exhibit, but you're allowed to get out your watercolors and dabble. I know during COVID, so many of us actually stepped into these things. I saw so many people painting and baking and writing music and just doing things that they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm good at it, but they were just trying. And I know the Lord delights in that when we just use the gifts he's given us. That was the other thing I heard you say. So one was the being obedient. The other was the things the things he's put in your heart that delight you, whether that is you're super social, so just inviting people over, maybe hosting more things. If that is something that God has put a delight in your heart for, or painting or writing or, whatever the thing is, organizing things. If that's your thing, then, help friends organize their closets or whatever the thing is, the things that God puts in your heart, like stepping into those now and not stifling that, I think is like, he's such a beautiful God. And it's so lovely. I am in my 50s to look back and see all of the ways he's taken everything and used it for his good. Yeah. And I love your example of you were blogging and now you're this really well author because you're telling truth about Jesus and it really resonates with people. And he took your faithfulness in blogging to build your writing muscles, to strengthen them, to make you a better writer. So when it was time to write a book, like you weren't doing writing 101. Like you'd been actually writing for years and honing your craft. So I think such beautiful encouragement wherever you are in your life to one, listen to God's little nudges and two, step into the things that delight you. And maybe it'll just be a hobby. Maybe you'll just bake delicious cookies and your family will be so grateful that you made cookies, or your workplace will be so grateful that you brought cookies in. And maybe, who knows, maybe you'll have a bakery one day. Like just see where God takes it and be open-handed with that.
And I'll just throw in there that I think it's an unpopular opinion to do something that you're not good at. I think we just live in a world where, yes, we have giftings, but sometimes those giftings need to be honed. Sometimes those giftings are something internal, but the external application might be something that we've never done and we're not actually really good at. And I think it's G.K. Chesterton that said, anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I think what he means by that is like, if it's a worthy thing to do, you're going to have to start somewhere. You should even do it, even if you're not really great at it. So I guess I'm just testifying that as somebody who's a recovering perfectionist, I tend to be like, I only want to do things that I'm good at. I only want to be known for being amazing and wonderful. And just, by way of personal testimony, this is one of the reasons why I sign up to speak at events and conferences and stages. It's not my natural thing. I don't like the beating lights on me, the cameras. I don't like a microphone. I don't enjoy standing on a stage with everybody looking at me. That's not really my comfort zone. I don't have that personality. And yet I say yes to that because I think it's really valuable to put yourself in a position where you're just not that amazing and that you actually find that what I'm called to do is going to make more of what God is doing in my life than what my natural snazzy giftedness is. And so be on the lookout for what God's called you to do, what you're naturally wired to be like, but also maybe take notice of what makes you scared. Because if that fear in what you're doing, if it's good, if it's worthy, but you're scared to do it, if it makes much of the God that you serve, it's probably worth you doing it scared,
Yeah, no, I love that so much. I think we make excuses all the time for why we can't step into something. But if God has given you that nudge, or like you said, if it's worthy of him, then it's worthy to do. So how do we trust him, Ruth, in those situations? Like you said, you don't like to go onto stage, but there could be something else. Maybe if we're an introvert, we don't necessarily like to volunteer at the church event because we'd rather stay at
Right.
home. But we talked about how important community is, and maybe we actually do love to volunteer. So how do we trust God that we can step into the thing we're not great at, we're not a rock star at, but that we feel
Mm-hmm.
like he still might be calling us to do?
Yeah, I think it's not an all or nothing. If you're do one act of obedience, you're not trying to sign up to be the person who organizes all of it. You're not trying to make your introverted self the most extroverted, whatever, or let's say maybe it's not natural for you to host a dinner party and you don't feel like you're naturally prone to like wanting to gather people. Well, then stop thinking of it like a dinner party and have one person over for dinner. See how like
Yeah.
you can still be obedient in something by starting small, by being like, okay, I'm kind of introverted. I get kind of scared. Why don't I have one person over? Just have one neighbor over for dinner and then grow in that. Don't aim for Pinterest worthy dinner party for 8. I think sometimes we go, okay, if I want to be obedient, I got to go all out. But maybe it's about just simply saying, Lord, I'm going to take all the things that are hard for me and that don't come naturally, but I'm going to trust you because I think you'll get a lot of glory if I just step out in faith in this. And
Yeah.
so what that looks like for me, since I brought up the example of part of my job is to speak and to encourage and teach from stage. So part of how that works out in my life is that I say yes to the things that I don't say yes to everything, but I say yes to the things that I think really are appropriate for me to step into. And then I don't try to be like everybody else. I say, okay, just because I'm saying yes doesn't mean I have to sound like somebody else or
Right.
do it like somebody else. I don't have to be the way I see somebody else do it. I can just be me and be obedient in where I'm called to be. So if you're volunteering at church and you're like, this is really outside my comfort zone, well, you don't have to be the person that does it a certain way. You can just show up and say, I'm here. This is who I am. I'm willing to do these things and just let God do the rest. Don't try so hard to make yourself fit in a certain like image of what you think perfection looks like.
Yeah, and on that same note, like Ruth, if you showed up like another Christian woman speaker, then the world would miss out on all the insights that God has given you
Yeah.
and the fact that he created you to be an artist and all of that metaphor and process that you can bring to the table and the experiences he's given you and the way he's let you see the world and the scriptures he's put on your heart. Like he made you so specifically. And I'm saying that to every woman listening, that he made you, back to Psalm 139 that we were talking about before, that not only does he know you, but he knows you because he stitched you together stitch by stitch. And he made you exactly how you're supposed to be. So you don't have to volunteer like she did or manage your team like that person does. And you don't have to have your home look like theirs, and you don't have to raise your kids like them. Like this restlessness, as back to the beginning of our conversation, if it's because you think you need to look like someone else, then remember that you're exactly who God created you to be. So how can you best mother your children, love your friends, support your coworkers, be a active member of your local church? How can you do that the way God created you? And sometimes that does mean stepping out of our comfort zones and out of our fear, but not trying to be like anybody else, just trying to be like the incredible person that God created you to be. Because if we try to be like someone else, we're actually keeping God from using the way he made us in the ways he wanted to use us. Yeah. Okay. So Ruth, this show is called Brave Woman, Mighty God. And we've talked a lot about how to be brave and how to step into things that God is calling us into and how to embrace the seasons we're in. But I ask every guest what one brave thing they're going to do this week. So, Ruth, what's one brave thing you're going to do this week?
Well, I am going to, this sounds very funny, but I'm going to rest
That's good.
during a very, I'm in retail. I run a company that stays very, very busy in fourth quarter. There is no end to hustling. There is no end to pushing harder. And I am choosing, with a lot of things that I can now set aside, I'm going to choose to be offline and rest in a lot of different ways in the next week.
I love that. I think that's very brave and very sage advice for anyone listening. Okay, Ruth, I will put links in the show notes, but please remind everybody who's tuning in how they can find you.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at Ruth Chou Simons. That's RuthChouSimons. And you can keep up with where I'm going and what I'm doing at the same name, RuthChouSimons.com. And my artwork and the products I create is at Grace Laced. And so thank you so much for letting me share about all that.
Thanks so much for being on today. So grateful for you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me as I chatted with the grace-filled Ruth Chou Simons. I appreciated her encouragement to take time to consider with Jesus why we're feeling uneasy or restless, and to truly embrace our now, knowing that God is with us in every stage and step of our work in progress lives. To find more from Ruth, her books, and her artwork, I've put all the links for you in the show notes. Make sure you're subscribing to Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast so you won't miss the next awesome episode. And for more ways to tap into the courage our mighty God has empowered you with, grab a copy of my latest book, Brave Woman, Mighty God, designed for individual or group study and available at booksellers everywhere. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. These reviews really help others find the show. Praying for you as you intentionally, courageously step into whatever God has for you this week, and that you remember that mighty Jesus loves you and will give you everything you need.